I contacted TSO with my idea thinking I've come up with this brainchild and they're going to love it. If you'd like to get yourself a set of these narrow stock guides, you know, the standalone ones, which I can still highly recommend, or build yourself up a set like I personally have and I want to continue to have, or any of the TSO tools, then jump on their Black Friday sale. I think this is their biggest discount of the year. You can double check that, but it also includes free shipping. I'll put my affiliate link in the description of this video down below. If you use it, they will give us a little bit, but they won't charge you any extra. In fact, you get the discount. Narrow rips with the track saw has been possible, but painful for a long time. I opted to avoid narrow stock ripping unless I was in a situation that I had no other choice. My preference was to set up the parallel guides, rip a piece of plywood, a multiple of the narrow stock. For example, if I wanted to do 4-inch wide rips, which is very common for cabinet building, I would make it 12 or 16 at most and a little bit more for blade loss. I would take that rip over to the table saw and then rip down to my 4-inch. The reason for that, of course, is muscling a full sheet of plywood through a table saw of any size is a recipe for inaccuracy, the micro wobble you get because human error of feeding a big piece of material through a table saw, even a big table saw. Unless, of course, you have a sliding table saw, whole different story. But any table saw with a fixed fence and bed, and then you're sliding the material across it, human error is involved no matter how good you are. With the track saw, of course, that's taken away. The human error is taken away because the track sits stationary and the material sits stationary and the saw locks into the track and moves. So there is no micro wobble. You get a perfectly straight edge. For wider rips, say 8 inches or so and beyond, no brainer. I'm going to the track saw every single time. I'm not even thinking about the table saw. But when we get short of that, then I had to come up with my hybrid fix where I use the advantage of the track saw and then the advantage of the table saw. Combine the two to create a very functional working method, which I will continue to use. If you like the Smart Woodshop, Smart Bench, the Smart Station, the smart carts that they're on, any of the smart accessories that make up the smart system, or even the Smart Woodshop itself, there is a link in the description of the video down below where you can go and choose your plan or package of plans, purchase it, and you'll get a receipt from us within minutes, 24/7, 365, and then you can download the plans to your phone, your tablet, your computer, whatever device of choice. The accessories to rip narrow stock, and TSO had the best, and I used them for years, were okay. I used them, I could trust them, but they were finicky and they were not as productive as my hybrid method until this year when TSO released these standalone parallel narrow rip guides. With the narrow stock rip guides from TSO, I actually started to prefer using the track to do my narrow rips than the table saw. Because even with the narrower rips, I still had to feed it through the table saw. Less of an issue because it was narrower and I could get it a lot tighter. And we all know the magic to feeding stock through a table saw is to put your eye where the blade is to the fence, just behind the blade, and as you're feeding through, you keep your eye on that and you keep that tight. And that's the way to get the most accurate cut. But again, when you're doing a big 4x8 piece or something close to that, that becomes very difficult. And you get what I refer to as the micro wobble. Even the best, most experienced carpenter out there, woodworker out there that is comfortable with those big cabinet table saws, you still get the micro wobble. With this, you don't. You get the straight edge. So if there was a way for me to be productive, then I would prefer it. And that's what these allowed, is I could set these up for my rip and then just take the whole track off and on and just go back, make the rip, make the rip, make the rip, get the exact same cut every single time, perfectly straight. And I could do that faster than I could take my rip from here, go there and feed that through. Each feed through, plenty fast, same speed with this though. So I got the same production level, but better accuracy and easier on me because sliding this saw across the track is less wear and tear on the body than feeding a long piece of material through the table saw. Snap those off, put these on, remove your parallel guides, put these on, and you can go to your narrow rips. Shortly after the narrow stock rip guides were released, TSO released their Gen 2 parallel guides. They are redesigned from the ground up. I did a whole separate video on these, but with this drop connector, the brand new rail, and the new stop, they have really improved already the best parallel guide on the market. Again, because I can drop them on and I'm ready to cut and they're calibrated. I don't need to recalibrate them. After getting my hands on the Gen 2 parallel guides with the drop connectors and the new stops and the new rail, I got to looking at the new stops and looking at the narrow stock rip guides and thinking, would there be a way to take parts of this and integrate it with this so that the one drawback of these is there's no scale on them and they have to be calibrated to your cut each and every time. So if you want to do a 50 millimeter cut, you set it up, you can make it over and over again. But then if you want to go to 75, you've got to make that adjustment, check it out with a separate tool, like a high quality combination square, set it up, and then make those cuts. Again, very, very accurate, but it depends on you to make that adjustment each time. Whereas with the parallel guides, we just dial the stop in to exactly what we want to cut, and we make that cut. Move it a little bit, make that cut. So I wanted that integrated with this. I contacted TSO with my idea thinking, I've come up with this brainchild and they're going to love it. I heard the smile over the phone because they were way ahead of me and they had already figured that out. And I was told, Ron, we have a set just like you're describing coming. We'll get them out to you to check out. And that's what I have here. These are also now available on TSO for you to purchase. So you have a choice of these or these. There are two changes I would like to see made to these, and I have contacted TSO, given them my feedback, and they took it very positively, so that may come. And I'll tell you about that in just a minute. One of the biggest advantages to the standalone is this foot. I mean, this is a big deal. If you've done narrow stock ripping, you know the problem with your track is you are way off the material. The edge of the material is way under here somewhere. The narrower the rip, the further under it is, and your track wants to tip down. So in the past, I would have scraps of material the same thickness as the material I was ripping, and I would put it around and move it around. It would slide. It worked, but again, it wasn't that productive. It slowed me down. Once these are hooked on, you simply loosen this knob, and this foot will drop right down to your bench or the cutting surface beneath, lock it on, and then the tracks won't tip down. And these feet here are standalone versions of the ones built in to the narrow stock guide. Here's where I'm at today. I pull out my narrow stock rip guides, and mine are standalone. I don't use these 20s for anything else. So I was able to dedicate these to the narrow stock rip. I also got a set of the drop connectors dedicated to these, and then of course the narrow stock stop, so that mine are set up and calibrated, and all I have to do is pull them out of the Smart Wood Shop using the drop connector. And then these feet are necessary, again, to keep it from tipping, because you may have noticed on this set, it doesn't have the drop feet. So these are necessary, whereas with the others, these are optional. Calibrated mine to 200 millimeters. So that means 200 millimeters is 0. So if I want to do 200 millimeters, I would set my stop to 400 millimeters. In fact, let's do 50 millimeters, even narrower, because the narrower the rip, the more challenging it is. That's how quick and easy it is to set up to be ready for these narrow rips. And I don't need to calibrate it except the first time, because taking them off and on with the drop connectors doesn't change the relationship of my stops to my track. Occasionally, obviously, I'd want to recalibrate, things getting banged around and double check, particularly before I'm going to do a big job. But I know these are calibrated and ready to go, so it's a matter of just dialing in my rip. So in this case, I want to do 50 millimeters. So since 200 is my 0, I'll dial in 250. With these non-parallax error indicators, it's pretty easy to dial them right in. And with that high contrast white on the blue, it's hard to go wrong. $50, $50, and $50. So it's not a matter of just cutting one. When I'm in production, I'm going to cut 5, 10, 15, 20 of these. And how accurate and productive, how quick, how efficient is it to just keep ripping them? Well, we'll rip one more just to check. Notice I bump it there. That's my little test. I've done enough of this to know that I can't really see under there, but I can feel it and know that I'm right up against it. Just pull it tight. Now, if I were going to cut more and more and more, I wouldn't stop and check each one. I would just lift this up, pull this one out of the way, bump it up against there, make sure that I'm pulled tight, and now I'm ready to cut my third one. I don't want to keep cutting up a good piece of wood. I think I've made my point. Let's check that second one to make sure we're still at 50. Absolutely perfect. So now narrow rips with a track saw are not only possible, but they're painless, productive, precise, and preferred over the table saw. I mentioned earlier that I had put in 2 requests to make changes to these that I think would just seal the deal and make it the best option for narrow rips, particularly for the small or portable shop. Number 1, this adjustable foot, just like the one on the narrow stock rip guides. I'd like to see that integrated into this stop. I think it's important because right where it's connected, if I can have the track supported there and there, that gives me absolute confidence that the track is not tipping. The second change I'd like to see is on the 20-inch stops. I would like to see them continue to offer this set. I think it's necessary to cover their range with the standard stops. But I would also like to see them produce a set of 20-inch where instead of starting at 200 millimeters or 8, that these are set up just for narrow stock ripping, and so that instead of 200, it'd be 0. And then I could set my stop right on the number I want, rather than having to do math. 200 is easy, but still, it depends on to remember that and go, I want 400, so I need to cut 600, or I want 200, so I need to cut 400. Again, not impossible, but I would like to see that issue taken away. And third is kind of the package that they would offer. They offer the standalone set, and I think they should continue to do that. They offer the 20-inch rail printed like this. I think they should continue to do that. I would like to see them add a pro set of narrow stock guides. That means this rail, calibrated and printed starting at 0, this drop connector, this stop, and with the adjustable foot on it, a pair of them in a kit, no options, you get all the pieces, and it would be called maybe the Narrow Stock Pro. It's going to be a lot more money because you've got the standalone, all of this stuff, but for the professional shop, the productive shop, where taking one stop off of one rail and making sure it's calibrated and then being able to go to that operation, that's something that would cost more in the long run than just the simple upfront cost of purchasing a set of these. Again, it's a professional tool. TSO could offer the best of both worlds for affordability and still the accuracy, just not quite the productivity. They could continue to offer the standalone set, but then for the pro shop or the productive shop, or for those that just want to have it set up and ready to use, then a set of the Narrow Stock Pros or something like that. Well, that was my offering to them. We'll see if they do it, but even if they don't, we have some pretty good options available to us today. If you enjoyed this video and you like these deep dives into looking at tools and options and really tearing into it and figuring out what really works for different kinds of wood shops, then be sure to give this video a thumbs up. And more important than that, if you really want to help us out, then share this video with somebody that you think this may help them. And of course, if you don't want to miss any of our videos, you need to let YouTube know by subscribing and ringing the bell. You got to do that combination. Otherwise, we could do 20 videos and you never hear about one. Mahalo for hanging out with me in the Smart Wood Shop.